All right, we have looked at some of the rulers that come from the Hasmonean family that was the result of the Maccabean revolt. As you remember, Mattathias refused to sacrifice a pig and stabbed the villager who was going to, and then stabbed the soldier. His sons then rose up and killed all the other soldiers that were there, which started a revolt led by Judas. His nickname was what? The Hammer, or Maccabeus. So that gave the name to the revolt, the Maccabean revolt. And we saw that through the wars that all of these guys were killed, except for eventually Simon comes to be the ruler that's left. In the cleansing of the temple that takes place during this time, we have established what holiday? Hanukkah, called Festival of Lights as well. We learned about that. Simon ruled as high priest and as prince over Israel, passed that on to his son John Hyrcanus, and things seemed to get worse as time went on, so that the Hasmoneans did not act any better than the Greeks that we had seen before in the families of Ptolemy and Seleucus. And so we see that John Hyrcanus actually moved toward Hellenism, which is what the battle was all about to begin with. Then we come to his son Aristobulus. Aristobulus, we said, gained power by murdering his mother and murdering 3 brothers. He expanded the kingdom greatly, but also followed a policy of forced conversion, so that the areas he conquered, he forced to become Jews. Then when he dies, he's followed by his brother Alexander Jannaeus, or Jannicus. I've seen it spelled both ways. He was known for being a cruel person. He had a passion for war and expansion. Now, as there's 2 parties that develop in what we will later call the Sanhedrin, is the council that they have. The parties that develop are the Pharisees, which came from the Hasidim, those righteous ones who were fighting to preserve God's law, and the Sadducees, who were the ones that were in favor of becoming more like the Greeks. And these 2 parties began to dominate the politics of Israel. And Alexander Jannicus sided with the Sadducees and expelled the Pharisees from the Sanhedrin, so becoming more and more Greek. This led to a Pharisaical revolt. The Pharisees, remember, back to the Hasidim, are the ones that led the revolt against Syria, against Antiochus Epiphanes, to begin with. But at this point, they asked Syria for help against Alexander Jannicus. So things are getting all topsy-turvy here. Do you see that? So the Pharisees, who originally had fought to drive out the Syrians, now are asking them for help to drive out Alexander Jannicus, who is becoming more and more Greek. Well, Syrian forces invaded. Alexander had to flee for 6 years. Well, once the Syrians helped drive out Alexander Jannicus, what do they want to do? They want to establish control again over Israel like they had before. So they tried to do that. So what did the Pharisees do? Well, we've got to get rid of the Syrians. In order to do that, we need to make peace with Alexander Jannicus. So they made peace with him and brought him back. Now, he comes back. They drive out the Syrians. Alexander Jannicus is on the throne. Everybody's happy now, right?
No.
Well, to celebrate, Alexander Jannicus invited the Pharisees to a big feast. Now we're all happy together. You know, the Syrians are gone. Now we can all cooperate and have peace. But when the Pharisees arrived at the feast, he arrested them and crucified 800 of them. Nice guy. The territorial control under Alexander Jannicus reached the same extent as under David and Solomon. So he has quite a lot of territory. But executions became so commonplace that many Jews left the country, and especially went to Alexandria, Egypt. The only thing that stopped this flow of people from Israel was when two rabbis, Yossi ben Yoser and Yossi ben Yohanan, issued a new law. They said, those who forsake or leave the Holy Land for other countries are ritually unclean. That means what? What can they no longer do? What can they know? What, according to these rabbis, what can these Jewish people no longer do if they leave the country? Offer sacrifices. They can no longer come to the temple and offer sacrifices. Which means, in effect, what they're saying is you no longer are part of the people of God. You're no longer saved. So, people didn't leave now, even though it was dangerous to stay there. Well, Alexander Janicus dies, and he is not succeeded by his son, as you might expect, but by his wife, Salome Alexandria. So we've got a woman now coming into the rulership of Israel. Her brother Simon ben Shitta was the leader of the Pharisees. Remember, Janicus was anti-Pharisee. Her brother is the leader of the Pharisees. So now she comes into power. So what's she going to do? Well, now the Pharisees are brought back into the Sanhedrin. She had a rather peaceful reign. You know, there are many women that say that if women ran the world, there wouldn't be so many wars. Who knows? We've seen some pretty vicious women in this historical cycle too, right? But here's a woman who apparently had a peaceful reign. But the fact that she was pro-Pharisee would later on lead to civil war between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Well, she appointed her son, Hyrcanus II, John Hyrcanus, he's named after him, John Hyrcanus II, as high priest. Many laws were enacted during this time. When she died, civil war broke out between her sons, Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II. He's the older son, and so he assumed power when his mother died. He was a quiet, peaceful man, and he had the support of the Pharisees. His brother, Aristobulus, was supported by the Sadducees. Well, he convinced Hyrcanus that he really didn't like being ruler. Hyrcanus, being a ruler is just not for you. You're too nice of a guy, so just let me do it. And so he allowed Aristobulus II to take control. Well, at this, Hyrcanus' army says, well, there's no point in us hanging around if he's not even going to fight anymore. So they deserted him. At that point, there's a man by the name of Antipater that arrives from Idumea. Remember Idumea? Mm-hmm. Down here, populated mostly by what kind of people? Edomites, or descendants of Esau. So this Antipater is an Edomite, and he comes up, he sees an opportunity. He comes up and convinces Hyrcanus that he's been cheated and that he should resume the war against his brother. Antipater told him to flee to Aretas, who is a king at the city of Petra. You ever heard of Petra? Petra is down near the Dead Sea area. I don't see it on here. But it's a city that was carved out of the sides of cliffs. Beautiful place. I'll show you pictures of it sometime later. And to go there, and eventually they'll be able to work their way back into getting the kingdom. Well, the two brothers are fighting, and basically neither one is able to win. And so Antipater arranged that they should appeal to another source to determine the winner. And the Roman general Pompey was in the area. He had been given this area, or the area nearby, to govern. And so they appealed to Pompey, come down and settle this dispute between the two brothers. So he did. And with Antipater's influence, Pompey sided with Hyrcanus. At that point, Pompey, in a way, took over. He came into Jerusalem with all kinds of ceremony, and entered the city and even went into the temple, went into the Holy of Holies. And he said, all right, I'm going to establish Hyrcanus as the high priest and the ruler. So now Rome is getting its hands into Israel. Antipater II, he's actually a second, we must call him Antipater, we don't really know anything about his father, is the real power behind Hyrcanus. He was a great opportunist. In 49 BC, Julius Caesar became emperor of Rome, and he waged war against Pompey in Egypt. Caesar found himself in need of more troops to defeat Pompey, and Antipater arrived with troops to assist him. He knew who to back at just the right time. After Caesar's victory over Pompey, he made Hyrcanus ethnarch, which is sort of a sub-king, not really a king, but kind of a king. So Hyrcanus is now ethnarch of the Jews. Remember, he'd been appointed high priest by Pompey. Now he's appointed ethnarch by Julius Caesar. And Caesar made Antipater a Roman citizen and governor over Judea. So we think about Judea, this whole area, Antipater had control over, even though Hyrcanus was considered the king in Israel. Aristobulus and his two sons, Alexander and Antigonus, we don't see on here, were sent to Rome. Aristobulus was able to escape from Rome, reassemble an army, and retake Jerusalem. So Aristobulus escapes, gets an army, and comes into Jerusalem and retakes it. Rome sent troops from which Aristobulus defended himself for 3 years before being captured. Then he was taken to Rome once again, where he was executed along with his son Alexander. So Antipater comes back into control. This time his sons were appointed as rulers, called tetrarchs, by Mark Antony, who now had control over this area for Rome. Things were going well for Antipater. He's in a position of authority. His sons have positions of authority. Things are going well until in 43 BC, he is poisoned, just after the assassination of Julius Caesar. Herod, the son of Antipater, stepped in and avenged his father's death. And he will later be known as Herod the Great. And so Herod was appointed governor over Galilee by Rome. His brother Phaziel was appointed governor over Jerusalem. In addition, Mark Antony, deposed Hyrcanus from the priesthood. Now, Herod the Great was a very good administrator as governor of Galilee. He got rid of all the robbers in the area, and that's always good news. Following the death of his father, though, his aim was to gain control over the whole area. And that will bring us to the end of the intertestamental period. The rest of it, the continuing story, we'll find as we get into the beginning of the New Testament period, because Herod the Great is the King Herod that you know of from Matthew chapter 2. And we'll talk more about him when we get there. All right, so and here's a picture of Jerusalem. Here's the temple area, the temple right there. There's the Kidron Valley over here, a steep slope down into the valley. The Mount of Olives is over here. This is the Hinnom Valley, which was a garbage dump, basically, here and here. And of course, these are houses that people are living. And eventually, we'll get to that little town south of Jerusalem, Bethlehem. All right, let's look back through our notes now, and I'll give you some key things to be looking at as you study for the quiz tomorrow.
Thank you.
Well, but first, anybody have any questions about what we talked about today? Would you agree with me that this would make a great TV series? Just by week, what's going on and what happens next. Very intriguing, right? Interesting. I wish somebody would do that and do it accurately. Unfortunately, whenever anybody tries to do anything for the Bible, they always add stuff that doesn't need to be added and take away things that should be there, and they mess it up. Anyway, all right, let's look back towards the beginning of your notes here. Of course, we have you certainly need to know about the four generals that divided up the empire of Alexander the Great, particularly Ptolemy and Seleucus. Those are the most important ones, obviously. Let's see. You should know about the Septuagint, so look over that. You should know about the origin of the synagogues, what they were for, what they were. You should make sure you understand the importance of Alexandria. There's certain things about Alexandria that you'll come across there. Don't forget about the appearance of Hannibal. Make sure you have straight who beat who at the Battle of Magnesia. The Battle of Magnesia was a very important battle. Probably the only battle you need to know. And make sure you look over the treaty that was signed after that battle. Have down what was a part of that treaty. And of course, Antiochus III, or Antiochus the Great, was the one that was involved in that battle. You should know what his intentions were, what he was trying to do, and what ended up happening to him. And note the mistake that his son made in trying to get money to repay Rome as well. Trying to get money from the temple. What happened there? And make sure you are able to relate the dream of Daniel of the ram and the goat and the small horn. We talked about that. Make sure you are able to identify Antiochus Epiphanes by the things that he did. And be able to recognize what were the things that he did, attempted to do. And then make sure you know the name of the priest who stood against the Seleucids, began a rebellion, and what that rebellion was called. And make sure you recognize Hanukkah, or the Festival of Lights. And it looks like we really don't have anything concerning Antipater and Herod, that family, on this one. They'll probably be included in the section when we get into the Roman Empire and the New Testament. All right, so that's pretty much it. Any questions? So look over your notes. Anything that you wonder, is that going to be on it? I think if you've been paying attention, I think you could probably take the quiz right now. But I won't make you. You could, but we'll do it tomorrow. So the time we have left, if you want to look over your materials, you may. If you want to quiz one another, you may. But you should not be talking about other things.
Yes.